Ever found yourself in a sea of confusing terms like MAF, Zone 2, and anaerobic threshold? You're not alone. In this episode, we're diving into training zones, unraveling the complexities, and helping you understand how different training concepts can relate to training zones. This is going to kind of be like the base training for more specific stuff we'll be getting into in later episodes. I'm Nick, your guide to RunningMadeSimple. Let's get started. When you boil it down, training zones are levels of physical intensity of physical activity. They serve as a guide so that you can perform a workout at the proper intensity to stimulate the desired metabolic systems. There are two primary models for training zones, a 5-zone system and a 3-zone system. There are other models, but they're not used very often, so let's eliminate any confusion. We're just going to focus on the 5-zone and the 3-zone. Before we go over the models, though, let's talk about how your zones are actually calculated. Your personal zones will be calculated based on a percentage of your max heart rate or a percentage of your lactic threshold. It seems like it's much more common to use your max heart rate, but I feel like that is horribly wrong. The first reason is that it's actually pretty hard to exercise at your maximum heart rate. Even if you're going all out, the lag in your heart rate, you're never going to really see what your max heart rate is. Plus, going that hard, you just increase your chance for injury. Or you might simply just not be fit enough to be able to push hard enough to get an accurate reading. Either way, that's going to skew your zones. Also, some people's max heart rate is close to their lactic threshold, and some people's max heart rate is fairly far from their lactic threshold. This again could skew the zones. The other problem with how max heart rate is calculated is many times it's not even tested, but it's based on a formula. You've probably heard of 220 minus your age. Well, I'm 41, and that would make my max heart rate 179. But the max heart rate I've seen on the watch is 200. So if I use this formula, I'd be wondering why I'm never improving, because, well, I'm training in a zone that doesn't stress my body to adapt. Another formula-based estimate is the MAF method, maximum aerobic function. This uses a few more variables, but I feel like it still sets your heart rate too low for serious training. It can be good to start out in the beginning, but if you want to run your best, you're quickly going to outgrow it. The better and more accurate way to find your lactic threshold and use that to set your zones. That doesn't mean you have to go to a lab to get it tested and pay the money for that. Most Garmin sports watches do a guided lactic threshold test as long as you have this chest strap heart rate monitor, which you should be using anyway for any heart rate based training. The wrist heart rate is just not accurate. I'm sure the other watchmakers have the same function. If they don't, you can Google a self-test method, and I'll be doing a video later on how to do a lactic threshold test. If you've heard all this and you're like, I don't even have a clue what lactic threshold is, well, one, thanks for not turning off the video. We're about to get to that answer. Let's first talk about the 5-zone model. Right up here, 5-zone models on the top here. In this model, zone 1 is your recovery zone. This is a zone you want to be in while you're doing active recovery, after like a hard race or a workout where you're just trying to get moving, flush your legs out, just recover so you can get back to doing a hard work or race sooner. Zone 2 is the zone everyone's talking about right now. That's that zone 2 training. This is your aerobic zone. This is the zone the majority of your training should be in. There are a lot of people that claim they can't run in this zone. My heart rate shoots up too fast. I'd have to slow down and walk. All this. Don't be one of them people. If you're trying to do zone 2 training, just do it. Stay in the zone. If you have to walk. It's going to pay off later. The people that say that, they don't have a base. They have no foundation to their training, and down the road it's just going to lead to problems. Moving on, we have zone 3. which is the tempo zone. We have zone 4, which is the threshold zone. They're pretty much the same. It's just the area where you're going to be getting into race paces, like marathon pace be on the lower end, half marathon, 10K, maybe even 5K if you're kind of slow. And then zone 5 is your anaerobic zone. That's where efforts start to hurt, and they start to hurt quickly. Using heart rate at this point is probably not going to be very helpful. Your heart rate lags your effort by a bit, and the harder that effort is, the more it will lag. So doing a really hard short interval may result in the interval being over and your heart rate still going up. But these intervals are usually max effort kind of thing. So when you get to that point in your training and you're doing these kind of intervals, just feel the first one out, go a little easier than you think, and assess whether you need to pick it up or slow it down. The other model we're going to talk about is the 3-zone model. That's down here at the bottom. This is the model that is used in sports physiology research. In a 3-zone model, you have zone 1, which is easy. That corresponds to zone 1 and 2 in the 5-zone model. Again, all your easy running should be in this zone. If it's training for a long run, you want to be near the upper end of it. If it's recovery, 10 beats below or whatever. Now here's the boundary. Some important things happen at this boundary between zone 1 and 2. The boundary has a few names. Lactic threshold 1, ventilatory threshold 1. I'm just going to call it LT1. And the first thing that happens at LT1 is you start breathing harder. This is why you might have heard of easy running called conversational pace. So if you can talk with your friend while you're running, this is a good gauge for this zone if you don't have a heart rate monitor. Below LT1, you're only producing lactic acid at your baseline. So that red line there, that's flat. You're not increasing it. And finally, right below LT1, that is the point where you metabolize the highest percentage of fat. That is why zone 2 training is so effective. It is easy enough. You're not accumulating lactic acid, making recovery take longer. You're becoming more efficient burning fat, and you're working at a low intensity that has a low risk of injury. Now, there are a couple other benefits you often see touted in zone 2 training, claiming it is the best zone for building mitochondria, which are the things in your cells that make your muscles work, and increasing capillary density, which basically means more veins go into your muscles, giving them more oxygen so they can work. That's not entirely true. The tempo and threshold zone 2 or zone 3 and 4 up here, zone 2 down here, they're actually the best zones for that. You do get the benefits in zone 1, is just not the best zone for it. Okay, so now let's get to zone 2 here. This is the tempo zone. It's between LT1 and LT2. LT2 over here is 99% of your time. If you hear someone talk about lactic threshold without a number, they're talking about that one. This is the zone the lactic acid starts to increase, but it can still be cleared and recycled faster than it's being produced. You catch that last part? It can be recycled. The body actually converts lactic acid into glucose for energy. Without getting into the whole tempo versus threshold thing, that's really a whole episode on its own. This is in this zone, like your longer intervals are going to obviously be on the lower end. Shorter intervals will be at the higher end, where you can get pushed closer to LT2. The idea behind working in this zone is you're staying below LT2. Once you get above LT2, recovery takes significantly longer. There was a study that showed that exercising at 90% of your lactic threshold, the LT2 right there, gives you 90% of the benefits of training at your lactic threshold, but you recover significantly faster. So you do easier work for longer, and get almost the same benefit and have a shorter recovery, which allows you to do that hard work again sooner. That's the basis for the Norwegian method. You are teaching your body to recycle lactic acid more efficiently. So whether you're trying to increase LT1 or LT2, the most effective approach to do this is to work close to but below and close to but above. So that's pretty easy to do right there. When you're trying to increase LT2 and you have to work above it, that's kind of when it begins to break down. At that intensity, lactic acid is building up and faster than it can be used, and hydrogen ions are also being produced in the process, which is causing your legs to burn. It's not actually the lactic acid that makes the burn. You can only work above LT2 for a short time. There are 3 main systems you work in zone 3. Oh yeah, sorry, we're talking about zone 3 here now. The first system in zone 3 is VO2 max. VO2 max refers to the maximum amount of oxygen a person can utilize while exercising. I'm going to set this down. We don't need this anymore. Obviously, increasing your VO2 max is important for running fast. But doing VO2 max work is intense, but still fairly long. It is really easy to overdo it. These are usually around 3-minute intervals. The next system you will work is your anaerobic system. These are short, very hard of intervals, around a minute to maybe 90 seconds. You're training your body to use and break down glucose without oxygen. The final part of zone 3 is neuromuscular, which really isn't a heart rate zone. You are utilizing the creatine phosphate system, which is the only system that doesn't use fat or carbohydrates for energy, but only lasts a very short time. It's basically free energy. Like, you have 8 seconds where you can push as hard as you want, but once that's up, you're now anaerobic. Most distance runners are better off not worrying about this. Your time's better off spent working other systems, but in the off season it can be useful to train this a little bit. Well, I don't know if I've made this more clear or more confusing, so here's the too long didn't read. Most of your training should be in the easy zone below LT1, where you can talk in sentences. Most of your workouts should be in the medium intensity zone between LT1 and LT2. This is where you can work fairly hard but also recover quickly. Work above LT2 is hard and needs to be targeted because you are limited due to the high intensity. We will get into how to structure this in later episodes. Also, if you already know your lactic threshold, or if you're going to take a lactic threshold test, I will put the percentages for your zones in the description, and I'll just use my lactic threshold as an example in there. Also, I want to take this time to announce I am opening my coaching practice, Running Made Simple. I am offering free consultations and really good rates to get started, so get in now, lock in that low rate. I'll get you ready for anything from a mile to a marathon or even more. We can do ultras. I'm going to put my email contact in the description. And that's a wrap on training zones. I'm sure I left something out in this video. It's a pretty big topic. Let me know what I left out. Anything you'd like to add, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.